Welcome back to another episode of Sal and Pals Go to the Movies. I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hey, everyone.
And today we're going to be reviewing Joker. And just a fair warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. Joker centers around the life of Arthur Fleck before he became the Joker, and shows how society can dictate a person's character and how he evolves. So let's start off by going down the cast and crew. We have the director, Todd Phillips, and we have Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Fleck, Robert De Niro as Murray Franklin. We have Saucy Beats as Sophie Dunman. We have Frances Conroy as Penny Fleck, Brett Cullen as Thomas Wayne, and this is basically the general cast that we have for this movie. I'm going to start my review with things I liked and I found interesting. So this movie gave me a Taxi Driver vibe since Robert De Niro is in it and Arthur dresses just like Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver. And for those who don't know, Taxi Driver is a movie directed by Martin Scorsese. This movie seems to be the other side of the coin. It's the Joker's point of view. We start off by seeing Arthur, played by Joaquin Phoenix. He is meeting his social worker and he does ask the social worker to increase his medication, which leads us to think that he suffers from a mental illness, but it's never really clearly stated what his condition is. That he just takes medication for the condition. And the side effect of the medication is that he starts laughing uncontrollably when he is faced in a situation that stresses him or he doesn't know how to socially behave, and his mind cannot cope with this. So it leads him to laugh hysterically. This leads him actually to be called freak, weirdo, and other stuff by random people that he encounters. And he even has a card laminated he gives to these people to read that states what his condition is, that he's taking a medication, and this is the reason he's laughing. This is how he tries to tell them that he is not a freak or a weirdo. He's just suffering from a condition. But the people don't see it that way, so they treat him differently. Which brings me to something that caught my attention. There are a few quotes that really tie into this theme. The first one that he writes in his journal: "The worst part about having a mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't." And he writes this in his journal that he takes to his social worker. So this quote really caught my attention because us as a society, we seem to ignore people with mental illness to the point that we turn them invisible, or we don't want them to stand out. When they do act out due to their condition, we just tell them act normal, as if it's a switch they can turn on and off. This is actually led by another thing that he tells his social worker later down in the movie when he meets her again. He says, "You don't listen, do you? You just ask the same questions every week. How's your job? Are you having negative thoughts? I always have negative thoughts." That quote to me means like, you guys aren't listening. I'm invisible to you. You don't pay attention to me. I'm just another number for you. And basically, this is how society treats our veterans, treats people with mental condition, that we just basically try to feed meds and try to ignore them. Society doesn't really want to help. They just want them to be complacent and silent, or even invisible by giving them meds. And this way, by just feeding him meds, he becomes invisible, as he says later down in the movie, that people are finally starting to see him. And the reason is because he stopped taking his meds. And this is backed up by the social worker in a quote that she says, "They don't give a shit about people like you, Arthur. They don't give a shit about me either." This is the social worker telling us that she's not the one to blame. She's just following the society's rules. And you can see this in different ways, but to me, it just seems like we're just trying to put a band-aid over anything that we don't want to see or try to hide it in a corner. I really enjoyed the random humor and where they chose to place them. For example, when he speaks to the cops outside the hospital and then he stops them from asking questions and turns around and just walks away. He runs into the closed door of the hospital to the point that he's trying to open it and the cop says, "It says exit only." This is a funny scene. A lot of people laughed in the theater, but the other scene that I found funny is in the scene where he kills his ex-coworker, but the little person in the room, he lets him live. This was a really tense scene, but they actually placed a slight humor into it by having the little person try to leave the apartment, but the chain was on and he can't reach the chain to unlock the door, so he asks Arthur, "Can you unlock it?" By having this in the scene, it made the scene a bit less tense, but then Arthur does something that really caught me off guard when he tells him the reason he let him live is because he was one of the few people that was nice to him, and then kisses him on the forehead and lets him leave. This really stood out for me because it showed that he isn't really randomly hurting people. He is tired of just society stepping all over him, which along with a later thing that he says in the movie made me recall the "We live in society" meme. If you aren't familiar with this meme, it's a meme that compares two images of a similar thing and using social media reaction icons gives one more value than the other. For example, the most famous one that you might have seen around is the Mickey Mouse next to a drawn cartoon of a regular mouse. And Mickey Mouse has the most likes, comments, and views versus the other. This is what I think author feels that his life is like, having always been the inferior version of a son, a worker, a comedian, and just a regular person due to his lack of social skills or his condition. I also saw that the Joker movie uses stairs that he takes to get his apartment as a marker to split the movie into 3 acts. Act 1, where we feel sorry for him, and Act 2, where we're rooting for him to get his break. We see him climb the stairs at night, tired, finding it hard for him to get to the top, a real struggle. But during the 3rd act, when we are seeing what he is becoming and we start to rethink who we are rooting for, we see him dance down the stairs. And this scene is during the day and he's actually happy and in full Joker costume, almost like floating down with such an ease. The top of the stairs to me represents a standard that society has placed on how he should behave. In Act 1 and 2, it's hard and difficult for him to reach the top, but during Act 3, the bottom is the opposite. For him, it's actually easier to achieve the bottom, and all it takes is for him just to accept who he is and fully embrace the Joker. Now on to my cons. My only con is when we find out that he imagined that he was dating his neighbor. When he goes into her apartment and sits down and he scares her and she just asks, "Aren't you the guy down the hall? Aren't you Arthur?" Then we see flashes of him with her together when they've been out together, and then we see that it's just him by himself. So we come to find out that he's been imagining all this. In a sense, I feel that we are being spoon-fed this versus just having her say, "Who are you? Are you the guy down the hall?" And this making us come to discover by ourselves that they never dated and he just imagined all this. This whole pushing us towards the answer wasn't really working for me. I felt that it would have been more gratifying if we came to the logical conclusion of this. I feel that this wasn't the right way that the director should approach it. I felt that we are smart enough to understand what we were seeing and come to a logical conclusion and find out, oh, he imagined it. And I guess with that, I'm going to pass it on to Touly and see how he saw this movie.
I went into this film trying very hard not to omit the fact of who this Arthur guy was going to become later, aka the Joker, and the sort of things that he does to people to get the upper hand or get his way. That I can't ignore. But the one thing that I would say that this movie did very well was portray at least their version of an origin tale of how Arthur became Joker, and to kind of get me to, if not root for him, like I said, I'm trying very hard not to root for a guy who does the sort of things that he does later, but more like understand why he's doing what he did. And from that perspective, I could sort of appreciate the transformation from the creative aspect. And I suppose an example I can kind of give that would kind of have Joker, or in this case Arthur, kind of fall into, where you sort of feel sympathy towards. You understand in a way where they're coming from is, if I were to jump to the Marvel side, in this case, Thanos from the current Avengers film and Killmonger from Black Panther, where they give you some backstory as to where these characters came from and why they were doing what they did in the present to better society from their perspective. Thanos wanted to manage the resources so that enough gets divided among the living creatures, but in order to do that, he had to sacrifice half the population. You know, the way they described it, it made me, I don't want to say buy into his cause, but it's more like, yeah, you think about it somewhat from a logical perspective, he does make some sense. Now, his means of achieving that, that's a totally different story. And that's why Thanos, in still a high degree, is treated as a villain. Same thing as Killmonger. His ideas of achieving what he wanted to do was on the extreme side. But do I get where he's coming from given his background? Yes, I understand. And I can appreciate his transformation from where he started to where he wanted to get to. This is kind of how I was treating Arthur here as he was becoming Joker. I understood his past because the movie touched upon how Arthur was adopted and that the mother that he thought was his biological mother wasn't who she really was. She was a person who was delusional and who watched her son get, for the lack of term, beaten up by her husband at the time. And she just stood there and didn't do anything in a way that contributed to how Arthur became who he was. I'm not saying that was the X factor, but it did play a role. And for her to keep this information away from Arthur and him feeling betrayed, given how much he cared for her. Like when he came back from work and how he was preparing her meal, getting her ready for bed, watching TV alongside her. You really feel that Arthur cared about this person, and for her to have betrayed him like that. And of course, Arthur reacted to an extreme level later in that film. He actually ended up killing her. Again, you're walking that fine line of, yes, I understand that he was angry, betrayed, frustrated, given all the other things that he's gone through his current life, and how he said to himself that there was never a moment in his life where he felt happy. It kind of really just pushed him over the edge, and he started trending down this very, very dark path. And of course, that's the path that leads up to him becoming Joker. Yeah, all the little things they showed us, all the nuances, how kids were beating him up after taking his sign, and he was just wanting to get the sign back for his job. Really, he didn't want to cause anybody trouble. He wanted to become a stand-up comedian, but given his condition, people didn't sort of see him that way. Even Robert De Niro's character Maury, who was the host of this talk show, he took advantage of Arthur's situation when he showed footage of him at the stand-up comedy club, where he was just going through his condition of being unable to stop himself from laughing, and sort of embarrassed Arthur in that sense. And Arthur thought that he was never going to get the opportunity to be on Maurice Franklin's show anymore, because he always had this dream of being on the show. And there was even an emphasis put on that by having him imagine a sequence where he was on the show. But then Maurice Franklin turns this around just because of ratings, that people were reacting positively to this clip, that they invited Arthur to his show. To what Arthur pointed out to him in the conversation that they were having face to face, that he only did this for his own game. I'm talking about Maurice Franklin now. They don't care about people like Arthur. If something bad was to happen to somebody who didn't have that sort of image that was supposed to be representative of society, then they would just toss these people aside, walk over them, and that'll be that. But if this happens to somebody who has a prestigious name, or somebody with celebrity fame or something, people will go wild about it, and they will rebel or make the situation well known. And this was the idea of how his Joker reform sort of began, even though it was unintentional. I feel like all the stuff that came after him doing all of this, I feel like it was unplanned. It just came about from people who maybe felt the same way as he did. Like they were just frustrated that society wasn't giving them a fair shot, or they were just holding them back, etc., etc. And so, Arthur did what he did. I would say that was one of the more shocking moments of the film, for me at least. I don't want to say I didn't see it coming, because like I said, Maurice Franklin already depicting Arthur in that bad spotlight and then just taking advantage of the situation thereafter, just because he knew the ratings were going to be high. It's one of those situations where, you know what, we're going to just take everything that we can from you now, and once we're done with you, we're shipping you out. Again, the things that Arthur was going through, the betrayal from his hero, from Maurice Franklin, from his mother, and to some degree, Thomas Wayne, aka Bruce Wayne's father. This is something that I would say I am conflicted about, and maybe it's more on my con side of this film. If I were to say something bad about this film, it's about how they portrayed Thomas Wayne. It's kind of like to the degree of, if you reverse this, it's kind of like if you see this hero go through their progression of struggle or defeat, rising up and becoming the hero that protects people. And then you see the villain, and you automatically assume this guy is bad. It's the antagonist. I'm supposed to root against them because there's so little backstory to them, unless they provide some sort of detail, like how I mentioned earlier with the Black Panther with Killmonger or Thanos. Unless they do something like that, you're automatically going to assume this is the bad guy because they're just the bad guy. They're just who they are. In this film, I sort of saw Thomas Wayne in the same light. Yes, I know that he's the father of Bruce Wayne. He's supposed to represent good, and he even said himself in this film that he's trying to protect these people or help these people. They just don't see it. But the attitude or the sort of aura that they had around Thomas Wayne in this film, it made me feel like he was like a douchebag sort of way. I mean, I'm not saying that he was a douchebag, but based on the context of how they presented Thomas Wayne to us, and given how they presented Arthur to us, since he's the main character of the film, and how he tried reaching out to Thomas Wayne about him potentially being his father. But of course, that idea was shot down because that idea only came from his mother, who was, again, delusional. I felt like if there was something that they could have either done better or even left out, was the whole Wayne family arc. This is a standalone film, I think, and I don't feel like they're gonna branch off of this and have the Bruce Wayne in this film relate to what happened to his mother and father here as a result of what Joker did. Joker wasn't the one who killed his parents in this film, but it was what he did that led up to the rebellion of the Gotham City citizens that led to this guy, going down the alley and shooting Thomas and Martha Wayne, which we're all familiar with already too. So if they just left that all out, I would have been okay. Or had they just done it in a more subtle way. And because of that, I felt like it was forced. Just like a couple other things in this movie, I felt like they were kind of forced, or they took some liberty in their creative style of telling the story. The biggest complaint I had was the Wayne family integration into this film. I could have just been okay without it, really. I can't believe I haven't said this yet either. Joaquin Phoenix, who plays Arthur Fleck in this film, he did a phenomenal job as his portrayal of Arthur Fleck and how throughout the film slowly drifting off to this dark side and eventually Joker. And I know other people might feel the same way too, where they've come up to me and they've asked, so was his Joker portrayal as good as Heath Ledger's? And to them, I say, well, I personally feel that's kind of an unfair comparison because Heath Ledger did such a phenomenal job at playing Joker himself that now you're going to hold anybody else to that level of performance. And because of that, despite whether or not how well that person or that actor plays Joker, because you're never going to be able to elevate them to the same level of Heath Ledger, you're sort of looking down upon them. So for me, I'm more on the side of Mr. Phoenix did a wonderful job at playing this sort of Joker. It's not Heath Ledger's Joker, but he played his own style of Joker, and it worked for me. Like his laugh throughout the film, I was feeling sorry for him in a way because I knew that he couldn't control that sort of disorder that he had. And he kept on having to hand people this card that tell them, hey, he has this disorder. But at the same time, that's a quality of Joker as well. Like we characterize Joker with this sort of laugh. Again, you're trying to differentiate Arthur Fleck from the person he's going to become later. And I think Sal earlier hit it on the spot where it didn't matter you had like a disorder or the sort of background or situation you came from. People are still expecting you to behave in a certain way, in a certain politeful or societal sort of way. But for Arthur, it was very, very difficult given his disorder, his work environment, how people were looking down upon him, and eventually how he felt betrayed by his mother, how he felt betrayed by his hero, Maury Franklin, and again, Thomas Wayne, because they brought the whole Wayne family into the conversation as well. And at the end, if I were to ask myself, did this movie convince me that Arthur Fleck was trending down the path of becoming the Joker that we are familiar with, either from the comic books or from other Batman movies? Simply, the answer is yes, and it did a fairly good job at it. And that's pretty much what I was hoping for going into this film. I wasn't expecting high action pace sequences, fist fights, whatever that you would expect from like a Batman movie. It was a very methodical, slow pace, but building sort of film that crescendo for me when Arthur went onto his talk show hero Maury Franklin show and he gave this speech about how he felt about society. He was having either this argument or debate against Maury Franklin, and then he shot his hero because he realized that Maury is just like the rest of them. He didn't care. In the end, I thought the film did a great job as a standalone film.
Again, let's give it up to Joaquin Phoenix for his interpretation of the Joker. It was phenomenal, and it was a delightful breath of fresh air to see that on screen. Especially, it cleansed my palate from the Jared Leto Joker. So thank you for that. When you say, like, is this Joker better than the other? I mean, for me, it's a top 10, like however you want to see it. It's not just like who takes the first spot and then forget about the rest. No, to me, everybody has their own thing. This Joker, to me, it was more of a, see him become the Joker versus the other one from The Dark Knight. You see Batman and the Joker already established, so we jump into that chapter of the story. And the only thing I think everybody agrees with me is that this really made us forget about the Jared Leto Joker. I think this movie was phenomenal, but I'm going to touch upon some things that you said about the Thomas Wayne. This whole thing is like, what's real and what's not. First of all, let's establish that we saw how Arthur was thinking that he was going on a date with his neighbor, but then we see that it wasn't real. It was just his delusion, just like his mom was suffering from a delusion saying that, oh, Thomas Wayne is her father. Maybe that also played into a factor because we see him grab the picture where it was his mom and on the back said, love Thomas Wayne, and he crushed it up. You still left with this, like, so what's real, what's not? It's up to you to interpret. Was the picture real with the signature, or was it just a fabrication of their minds? Is Thomas Wayne really how he was portrayed in the movie? It's basically each person's point of view. Somebody might see somebody doing something good, but other people might be seeing them as gaining fame. And that leads me to this whole notion of what's real, what's not. This is the whole concept of this movie. You decide as a viewer what's real, what's not. The same way he actually believed that Murray Franklin was somebody that he looked up to. And he goes on to his show and then he finds out that Franklin Murray was the same thing as the "We Live in Society" meme. Like, he just does it for the fame. You're trending, come on the show. Or you're not trending, get lost. He doesn't give people their dues. But then this is when Arthur realized that, and he went on the show with one intention, and that's what Touly said, to basically see his hero. And then he just fell out of love with him. He's like, you're just like them. You're against me, kind of thing. So this whole thing, and the way he talked on the show, saying how society is the one who dictates what's funny or not, is the same principle as who dictates what's beauty, who dictates what's the current fashion, you know, what's acceptable, what's not. This is the thing society is doing. And at the same time, he also said, I'm not political. I'm not doing this whole thing. It's not an act. This is just me. And whatever results from the people out there writing, I'm not with them. They're doing their own thing. It's like he just woke them up. Was I happy that I went to go see this movie? Yes, I was. It basically opened up my eyes, and like, not just to what the message was, but just to say how we see the Joker, how we can take this character and interpret him in different lights. You know, some people see him from the cartoon as a funny character, like he squirts water and then he's just playing with Batman. But in this one is who created who. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Touly and see what his final grade for the movie was.
I'm going to give this film a 7.5 out of 10. It is definitely a different type of film when it comes to like superhero, if you want to categorize it in that sort of film. Or maybe it's more correct to say an origin tale, because you're seeing it from a soon to become villain perspective. But like I mentioned earlier, it does a very good job with the meticulous style of how Arthur is transformed from just trying to be a guy who make his dream become a reality, but struggling through life with all these things going against him, especially with him and his disorder, with what he went through with his mom, with his hero, and again, what happened with the Wayne family. I was definitely bought in. Like, I was there for the entire ride, and there was very few moments where I was unglued to what was happening in front of me. I just wanted to see what else could happen to Arthur and how he was gonna react to the situation. Definitely a different sort of origin tale, but I would say if you're a fan of the Batman series and you want to get to know a potential story or tale of how this villain became who he was, then I would say check this out and sort of go into the movie without the expectations of action-packed sort of stuff that we're used to in, you know, Batman movies, stuff of that nature.
I would give this movie a 9 out of 10, and I think Joaquin Phoenix is getting an Oscar nomination. This movie is a Joker origin story, and yes, there are other stories of the Joker out there, but I see this as an alternate universe story, you know, a what if kind of situation. Also, if you go see this movie, you'll find homages to the Heath Ledger Joker, homages to Adam West, and other such things, so keep your eyes open for those. This movie also plays the devil advocate and shows us the view from Arthur, the Joker, and how Gotham became to be. And then it is up to you whether you want to believe the Joker's version or Bruce Wayne's version. Did the Joker create the Batman, or was it Batman who created the Joker? So with that, we wrap up this review for the Joker. Please join us next time when we're going to review Zombieland Double Tap.
Those are for pussies, nothing personal.
How could that not be personal? That's like my whole thing.
Yeah, you're right, it was personal.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and you can find our social media links below. And like always, keep watching movies.